The Banshee's Warning. A Madison Meyer side story. Madison Meyer. I had learned from TV that stakeouts were boring. TV had underestimated just how boring it was. Sitting in a car, staring around, waiting for something to happen. It was like slow torture. The area was pretty with lots of trees and a stream that wound its way through them. There was lots of space and even more privacy, something I had loved when I was younger. As a kid, being allowed to wander through the woods was the best. It was my favorite memory from my own childhood, wandering through the forest around Emma's house. The trouble was, when doing a stakeout, privacy wasn't such a benefit. We'd been given permission to park the car in one of the neighbors' driveways. We could see our client's house, as well as the woods, and even a glimpse of the stream as the moon glistened off it in the distance. I checked the time on my phone for at least the 10th time in the last hour. Again, only a few minutes had passed. Erkins huffed, scowling out the windshield. "If you don't stop fiddling with your phone, you're going to draw their attention. Then they'll never show their faces," he chastised, his eyes still fixed on the house we'd been watching for several nights. I set my phone down and nodded. Okay, I would have made a crappy cop. I knew that already, though. Patience was not one of my virtues. I hated waiting around for something to happen. And yeah, my temper would have been an issue if I'd ever decided to wear a uniform and badge. Erkin snorted. "You would have revolutionized the computer systems, then gotten bored. It's your way, Madison." I scowled at him, but he was right. All I needed was something to distract me from the boredom and the closed-in feeling of being in the car for so long. I fixed my eyes on the house as well, hoping we would spot the monster before it struck. It was horrible to be using someone as bait, but we'd had no other option. A banshee was a death herald, and our client had hired us when his son had heard the creature's wailing. I did my best not to fidget, but it was no easy feat. "Erkins, will you tell me about the first banshee? The one that got you kicked off the police force?" I asked, hoping he would answer to give me something to focus on. He made his usual angry bulldog noise. "That mess was nothing like this," he said. Though since he hadn't told me to shut up and watch the house, I took it as a good sign. I settled in, glad to have something to think about other than staring at the house. I had wanted to know the full story for a long time. I'd never had the nerve to ask until that night. Erkins rubbed his chin, his eyes narrowed in a sorrowful way. "I've always thought there was more to the world than most people believed. I didn't have any proof, but I'd read stories about other people seeing ghosts and crap like that. I knew some of it really was crap, but I guessed some of it was real too." He continued on, his eyes scanning the area in his usual attentive way. Chief Theron was new, a young guy who'd made a name for himself in Erie. He and his family moved to Pittsburgh, and he started trying to whip our guys into shape as well. There weren't a lot of happy cops when he showed up. I waited, curious to see why he was giving me so much background. It wasn't his usual style. Under normal circumstances, he'd tell me to mind my own business and go on about his own. Erkins rested his hand on the gear shift and blew out a breath.
Everybody thought it was a big joke when the new chief's kid was placed in the Psychiatric Institute at UPMC. The kid claimed a woman appeared next to his bed, screaming her head off, and told him his mom was going to die. The night after Kip was hospitalized, the chief's wife was found dead in their house.
My stomach clenched, a lump rising in my throat. In all the research I'd done on Erkins, I'd never probed deeper into the lives of the people he'd been close with back then. The idea of a child going through that kind of trauma made me want to weep. Erkins grimaced.
Bukowski was my partner back then. I didn't like it, simply because of his relationship with my daughter. He was a good enough cop, but a less than decent husband. Needless to say, we didn't really get along.
He tapped his fingers on the gear shift and shrugged a little.
All we found in our investigation was that the chief's house was locked up tight. Kip was at the hospital, the chief was at the station, and Mrs. Theron's body had practically been crushed. It was one of the worst things I had ever seen, and I'd been on the job for more than 3 decades.
My mouth went dry as I listened, seeing it all as he spoke. Erkins blew out a long breath.
Bukowski and I had no idea what had happened, but that fool decided the chief had killed his wife. I knew he was wrong. He and I went to the house to talk to Kip when he came home from the hospital, and we both saw the banshee. That creature had gone crazy or something. Usually, a banshee just does her wailing to tell people someone is going to die. This one had decided to do her own killing. She had her arms around the kid, crushing him as she wept and screamed.
A single tear slid its way down my cheek. I had wondered why Erkins had been so determined to take the case we'd been hired for when it seemed to me like some kid who'd had a bad dream. He wasn't willing to let the poor kid suffer like the chief's son had. Erkins kept his eyes on the house, his expression even bleaker than it was before.
Like I said, I believed in the paranormal a long time before I had proof. I'd read things about how a banshee was a fairy, and I read other things that said salt and fairies didn't mix. I grabbed a salt shaker from the kitchen and dumped it on her.
He gave a small shrug.
The rest of it was dumb luck. The salt burned her skin and distracted her from the kid. She disarmed me, knocked me to the ground, and had her foot on my throat. I grabbed the first thing I saw, an iron fireplace poker. I stabbed her with it, and that creature just exploded.
I shivered, but my mouth fell open. Wait, you're telling me that Bukowski was right there during all of this, and he spent the next 8 years telling your daughter and granddaughter that you're crazy for being a paranormal investigator? I demanded, my eyes fixed on him. He glanced at me and rolled his eyes.
Madison, most people aren't willing to accept the supernatural. I keep telling you this. For the average person, paranormal creatures are the kind of thing that makes them want to crawl out of their skin. Most of them pretend like they've seen nothing because it's easier for them to handle it.
I scowled, unsure what it was that made people like me so unaffected by the paranormal. I supposed it didn't matter, but it did make me curious. Kip was okay, wasn't he? I asked, desperate for a small piece of good news to focus on. Erkins nodded.
broken ribs, and seriously traumatized by everything, but he lived.
I paused, hoping the kid hadn't let the trauma he'd endured ruin his life. My fingers inched toward my phone, wanting to look him up. I wanted to know precisely who he was and how he was faring. That was when I saw something in the trees. A dark figure had just appeared not far from the house, its hooded head tipped back as it began to shriek. Death was coming. I moved to get out of the car, but Erkins rested his hand on my arm to hold me back.
"Wait,"
he whispered, eyeing the trees behind the banshee. I looked as well, goosebumps rising on my arms as I saw a figure the size of a child skulking its way toward the house. That child thing was not human. It was an odd mix of humanoid and reptile with scaly green skin. I wouldn't have noticed it at all if I hadn't been looking for it. The thing was very well camouflaged in the trees. The banshee continued her wailing, her eyes fixed on the sky. It was like she didn't even notice the creature moving toward her. I didn't know if it was coming for her or for the kid who'd heard her screaming. I looked at the little creature and understanding filled me. Erkins, it's a kappa, a water demon. I didn't think they could leave the water, I said, staring at the little stream like it had betrayed us for releasing that creature.
"They can leave if they have the same water they live in on them in some way. Even a vial of it is enough."
He motioned to the little demon.
"Look, it's holding something."
I did look, and he was right. The demon was holding a bowl. It walked slowly like it didn't want to spill the water. It would be an easy fix to just knock the bowl out of its hands. There was no way it would be that easy, though. Nothing ever was in our world. I reached into the back seat, picking up a baseball bat and a canister of salt. "Will you let me handle this one? I'm in need of a win," I pleaded, not sure if he'd be okay with that or not. Erkins nodded.
"I'll wait by the back door of the house. If anything goes wrong, you swing that bat hard enough to bust concrete."
I smiled. "That's the plan," I said, getting out of the car and rushing out into the woods. The sounds of leaves rustling under my feet were blocked out by the banshee's commotion. Some of my favorite sounds came from the woods at night, so I wasn't a fan of that banshee. If only I had a sock to stick in her mouth. I pushed those ridiculous thoughts away and focused on the water demon who was apparently out to kill somebody in our client's house. The banshee's moaning was making it hard to concentrate on much other than plugging my ears. Since the salt canister was an Erkins special, it came with a strap that allowed it to be slung across my body. I did that, the bat held ready just in case. The moon peeked out from behind some clouds, lighting the area nicely as I got to the kappa. It only came to my waist, its attention fixed wholly and fully on the bowl of water in front of it. I had planned to come up swinging, just destroy the thing that kept it alive and go on about my business. As I looked at the little demon, I couldn't do it. It looked like a creepy little kid, not even worried about the fact I stood in front of it. I wasn't even sure it knew I was there. I cleared my throat to get its attention. The little demon turned its eyes up to meet mine, and it became clear that the thing was only a child. Its misshapen body and creepy little face probably should have scared me senseless. It didn't, though. It was hardly more than a baby. "Hi," I said lamely, not sure what else there was to say. The little creature's lips quivered up in a tiny smile. "Hi," it responded, its eyes turning back to the bowl in its hands. "Where are you going?" I asked, hoping maybe there had been a mistake of some sort. It met my eyes and smiled again. "Friend," he said, nudging his chin toward the house. And it hit me hard. The kid had been freaked out by the banshee, not by the Kappas. The two kids were friends. I crouched down so I was at eye level with the little guy. "You might want to wait and see your friend later." I motioned over my shoulder to where the banshee wailed. "She thinks you're here to hurt somebody, and everybody is freaked out right now." The little Kappa tipped his head to the side. "No hurt, friend. Love, friend," he informed, moving to step around me. I stood up, careful not to bump his bowl of water as I did. "Buddy, listen. You can't go tonight, okay? You need to go back to the stream. Can you do that for me, please?" I asked, irritated that the stupid banshee was making so much noise. The Kappa tipped his head back to look at me, the confusion on his face far clearer than any proclamation of friendship he'd made. A shiver moved its way up my spine. Something else was in the woods. It was the only answer. The banshee wasn't warning about the little Kappa. That was when the sound of a shotgun being pumped filled the air. I didn't know where it was coming from. All I knew was that we were in danger. The banshee's moans grew all the louder until an explosion of sound shattered the air. I jerked, doing my best not to jostle the bowl of water as another shot sounded out. My ears rang. My heart pounded. What was going on? Had somebody shot the banshee?
"Get out of the way,"
a voice said from behind me, and the shotgun was pumped again. I didn't move. "I will not," I stated, unwilling to let anyone hurt the little one. Whoever was there let out a loud snort of derision.
"That thing is a demon, and you're protecting it?"
I stayed where I was. "Yeah, he's a baby," I said, feeling the bowl of water the little one held tremble in time with its body.
"A baby that will grow into the kind of demon that lures people into that stream and drowns them."
I kept my arms around the little one, hoping the guy wouldn't just shoot me to get to the Kappa. "Buddy," I said into the little water demon's ear, "will you promise not to hurt people? If you promise, you can go back to the stream and visit your friend later." He shivered even harder. "Not hurt, friend. Love, friend," he said, loud enough for the guy to hear, but he was talking to me. And I knew he meant me. The little creature considered me a friend. I could hear the crashing of Irkins running through the trees. I had to do something to ease the situation, so I touched my lips to the creature's scaly cheek and moved to stand up. I used my body to block the Kappa from the guy with the shotgun, my eyes scanning the trees for Erkins. The guy shifted, so I shifted as well to keep myself between him and the Kappa. "Leave him alone. He is no danger," I said, shifting my bat around to make it easier to get a full swing in. Lit by nothing but moonlight, I couldn't see the guy in detail. What I could see was that he was close to my age, and that shotgun was pointed at me. The guy shifted again, trying to get a clear shot at my new little friend. I kept myself between the two, praying the guy wouldn't shoot me to get to the Kappa. Erkin stopped dead when he saw what was happening. His nostrils flared as he pointed his own gun at the guy.
"Kip, you need to lower your weapon. Do it. Now,"
he growled, his hand steady as a rock. My mouth fell open. Kip, the chief's son. Holy blue screen. He had just killed the Banshee. A Banshee had killed his mom and had attacked him, but going around murdering them? It was evil. The fact he stood there with his shotgun pointed at me because I protected the little Kappa told me even more. He probably wouldn't think twice about shooting me. Kip didn't look away from me.
"Erkins, tell the girl to get out of my way,"
he ordered, not even looking like he'd heard Erkin's order to lower his weapon. Erkins took a slow, deliberate step closer to the kid.
"Kip, put the shotgun on the ground, kneel down, and put your hands behind your head,"
he gnarled, his eyes boring into the side of Kip's skull.
"Do you know what she's protecting? Those things drown people." "You mean the little fellow who's trembling behind Madison's legs? That's why you're pointing your shotgun at Madison's heart?"
Kip sneered.
"She's protecting it. She's sick,"
he said, like he honestly believed what he was saying. The Kappa's little body was pressed into my legs, but slowly he shifted around to stand next to me.
"I not hurt friends. You not hurt friend,"
he said, tears shining on his cheeks as he faced down his own death. But there was no way I would let that psychopath hurt the little one. I was perfectly aware that Kappas weren't cuddly little pets. I knew they had the potential to do bad things. So did humans. Everyone had potential both for good and for bad. It was the choices we made that determined what we were. The little Kappa was friends with the son of our client. He had called me a friend too. He wouldn't suffer because of that. Not a chance. Kip lowered his shotgun so the barrel pointed at my little friend's heart. Kip was going to kill him. There wasn't even a hesitation in him. I brought the bat up, widening my stance, bent my knees, and swung. Ian had taught me the best stance to take when we were kids. Somehow, that lesson had stuck with me. My follow-through was perfect, connecting with the side of the shotgun and knocking the gun right out of his hands. Again, I stepped between Kip and the Kappa, the bat held ready again. Erkins let out a groan that ended with a chuckle. He stepped forward and took hold of Kip's arm, yanking him away from me.
"Just because something isn't human doesn't mean you have the right to kill it. If you ever come back to this place and try to hurt that little Kappa, I will shoot you myself. Now get out of here and leave that shotgun where it fell."
Kip glared at Erkins before he turned his glare on me. He didn't speak, but he made it clear as day he was not about to let that encounter go. He turned and walked back toward the road, his dark figure seeping into the woods like a shadow. I had a bad feeling we would be seeing more of each other very soon. Looked like the bat and I needed to become permanently attached. I lowered the bat and knelt down in front of the little kappa. "You know, I've read about kappas. Will you let me show you something?" I asked, hoping he would trust me. The little demon smiled at me yet again. "Trust, friend," he stated without even the slightest hesitation. I reached up and touched the odd declivity in his head. "Your bowl can sit right here. You still have to be careful not to spill the water, but I think it would be easier for you." All trust, he lifted his little arms and placed the bowl in that spot, his eyes wide with wonderment as he lowered his hands. I smiled at him. "Perfect," I said, feeling genuine love for the little one. He held out his hands between us. "Perfect, friend," he said, his eyes alight with delight. I laid my fingers over his hands. "What's your name?" I asked him, almost positive the little one didn't have anyone looking out for him other than the little boy. He considered, like no one had ever asked him that question before, then slowly let out a giggle. "Buddy," he said, squeezing my fingers in a way that felt like it was meant to be a hug. "Buddy, I'm Madison, and that guy is Erkins. We're both your friends." And right then, I knew we had to be careful. Yes, Buddy was a demon, but he wasn't bad. He was innocent and sweet. It was possible there were other creatures out there like him. I was determined that no one would hurt them. It didn't matter what someone was. It was their actions that determined the way they should be seen. Buddy was indeed my little buddy, and I would not let anyone hurt him or anyone like him.